How are you, folks? Dave Brown here with the New Populist. Thank you again for joining me. Now, in today's video, I want to talk about one of my favorite people, and that is Victoria Nuland, who is the former acting Deputy Secretary of State. And the reason I like to cover her is that she is probably one of the most bloodthirsty neocons in Washington, D.C. And for that city, that is saying a lot. If you don't know her background, she is married to Robert Kagan, who was one of the founders for PNAC, the Project for a New North American Century. She was the former UN ambassador from the United States. That was during the Bush years. And she has been in the State Department off and on the last 10 years. And in fact, she was on the ground in Kyiv in 2014 when they had the overthrow of the government there. So she has been one of the biggest players in Ukraine, pushing Ukraine policy, advocating for war against Russia. And she is so over the top, so bloodthirsty that the theory is that she was forced out of the State Department by Anthony Blinken because she kept on saying things that were really aggressive and going past what the Secretary of State Blinken wanted. So again, the theory is that she was asked to leave and she went to Columbia University and is a professor there right now. But again, she gave an hour-long interview talking about Ukraine, and I want to play a few clips and push back on some of the things she says because I do think she's pushing some of her own propaganda, and I do think there needs to be some filling in of the details to give a better perspective. Because again, she is 100% anti-Putin, anti-Russia, and she's just unrelenting in wanting to see Russia be destroyed. So going to play a few clips here and talk about them and again, give a little more detail that she's not giving that gives you a better idea of what actually was going on. So I want to start with a clip here where she's talking about the oligarchs back in the 90s. And the oligarchs were essentially corrupt businessmen who were stealing and plundering from Russia. And the way she talks about these two oligarchs in this clip is not really giving them the due credit for the evil that they were perpetuating on the Russian society. So I want to show you this clip here where she talks about them as being a couple of businessmen who were trying to get into politics.
But I think what's equally interesting, Misha, if I may, is what happened when Putin comes to power. Those first 5-10 years of Putinism, whether you count it from when he was prime minister or from when he becomes president, where he starts systematically ripping up the foundations of an open system, right? He goes after the press, TV first, and then the newspapers, and then radio. He doesn't allow those business people who had gotten rich to participate in politics. This is when he goes after Khodorkovsky and Gusinski, et cetera, because they dared to challenge in the parliament, his idea of reestablishing state control. We watched Putin systematically dismantle the very, very young democratic system in Russia. So when you see the free press go down, when you see business folks like Khodorkovsky, Gusinski, who are trying to become political actors, squished and attacked using the judiciary, when you see human rights organizations threatened, when you see, in fact, the direct franchise, right? He starts to roll back the way that original Yeltsin constitution elected local officials, et cetera, and he starts trying to have more control in the regions. Then there's a question. Is this a Russia that's on a more open European democratic trajectory, or is it consolidating power? And therefore, we're going to have a question about how much we can do together.
So she brought up these two oligarchs, Khodorkovsky and Gudinsky, among others. And again, back in the 90s, there were 7 oligarchs who formed a thing called the Semi-Bankershina. And collectively, these seven controlled the majority of the Russian economy, banking, media, and they controlled Yeltsin. Now, did they get their money because they were just great businessmen? No, that's not what happened. And in fact, we can go to Wikipedia, which is not a great source, but Wikipedia is pro-U.S., pro-neocon, pro-establishment thinking. So if you can find negative things in Wikipedia about these guys, it's a pretty good bet that it is true. So what does Wikipedia say about what these oligarchs did? And referring to Kaczynski, it says here, in February 1996, in Davos, during the World Economic Forum, not good people, together with Boris Berezovsky, he organized a meeting of Russia's most prominent businessmen. The group met to decide how to support the presidential bid of Yeltsin and to prevent the communists from returning to power. Further, the group contacted Anatoly Chubais, the creator and advocate of privatization, and convinced him to lead and manage Yeltsin's presidential campaign. Now, this guy who was leading the privatization, he had power to give certain businessmen contracts and bids on Russian state assets. And of course, he favored those businessmen who were at that meeting. So that was a guy that was running Yeltsin's campaign in 1996. And of course, we know that from Time magazine, we had American advisors secretly in Russia helping the Yeltsin campaign because he was behind. So we talk about election interference. Well, we had American advisors in Russia helping Yeltsin who were disguised as businessmen themselves. So we have these oligarchs who were controlling Yeltsin, controlling the economy, and getting filthy rich. And here's what it all says about these oligarchs, just to show you how corrupt they were. It says here, Wikipedia, the analysis of that period. The largest businesses were not part of the voucher program at all, but rather were auctioned off at low prices to a handful of well-connected oligarchs. The resulting wealthy business owners, feeling that their own property rights were insecure in Russia, engaged in asset stripping to move value from their companies to investments overseas. Overall, the effect was to concentrate ownership among a small number of private individuals who in turn raided their companies for personal gain at the expense of their companies, the state, the general populace, and the overall economy's success. So these oligarchs stripped these companies down. They were given these low bids for state assets. They took the money, put it overseas, and they did it at the expense of the state and of Russia during a time in the 90s when they were recovering from the fall of the Soviet Union. So these businessmen were really horrible in what they did to Russia. Now, Putin comes into power. What does he do? He goes after them. As she says, Victoria Nuland goes after the press and all these new democratic institutions. I'm not here to judge what Putin did as far as how Russia is run internally. I'm here to point out that we were standing up these businessmen as if they were, helping Russia advance when these guys were essentially bandits who were robbing and stealing from the country tens of billions of dollars. I think Khodorkovsky, he was worth like $30 billion back in the 90s. So that's like $100 billion now. And these are all, this is all from stealing from the state of Russia, all the resources, and by controlling the banking system. So these were not good guys who were helping Russia get better. But we supported them, the U.S., because, they were democratizing Russia. And we had our own people in the West working with them. And how can I prove that? Well, this top oligarch, after he was pursued by Putin, he started an organization called Open Russia. Now, Open Russia had on its board of directors Henry Kissinger, the former Secretary of State, and Lord Jacob Rothschild, the head of the Rothschild banking family in England. So, kind of funny that Open Russia would have those two huge globalist types on their board if this is about just making Russia a better place. Of course, we know about the CIA and color revolutions and how we use charitable organizations, NGOs, in order to promote democracy in countries that we don't like, countries that we view as being authoritarian. That's our objective. That's our modus operandi. Our NGOs just there to help. And that is why Russia, China have banned certain NGOs from the West, because they know what we're doing. Ukraine, for example, we invested $5 billion in democracy building. That's what we call it. George Soros, the infamous billionaire, he gave Ukraine $200 million, or spent $200 million to further democracy in Ukraine. And Poroshenko, the Ukrainian president, actually gave Soros a award for his efforts. So we spend money in these countries to push out the regime that we don't like and install people that are more friendly toward the United States. So I don't blame these countries for banning these organizations. We, for example, ban Russia, Russian TV, RT in the United States. We prevent, we had TikTok be sold off in order to be in the United States. So the United States, we protect ourselves from what we consider to be foreign actors or foreign influence. But when Russia and China do it, they're against free speech and against democracy. Of course, we're being completely hypocritical. This next clip is here. Here is when Victoria Nuland talks about being on the ground in Kyiv during 2014 revolution, where she was handing out cookies. And she wants to clarify this here because she says, I was here just to be nice, just to oversee what was going on. I wasn't involved. Don't blame me. I don't know why the Russians think it's such a big deal. So here's Victoria Nuland talking about her famous moment in Kyiv handing out cookies.
So you could argue that Putin drove them into our arms because they wanted and needed protection.
Winter 2014, the moment that made you a star of Russian propaganda, and the meme "cookies from the State Department" is still being used by Russians. It has become the part of Russian popular culture.
First of all, there were sandwiches. Let's just be clear.
Yes. Let's go there. Not cookies, but sandwiches. Do you regret that was some kind of, I don't know, or on the contrary, do you think that was a good PR, bad PR? What are your emotions about that little episode and such disproportionate consequences for the propaganda?
Look, I was an assistant secretary of state. I was a nobody. I was a Mielich, right?
Let me stop right there. Her characterization that she was a nobody, I don't buy that. She was at the time the assistant secretary of state for European and Asian affairs. She was the former U.S. ambassador to NATO. She was not a nobody. She was the person on the ground there directing U.S. policy. Later, when I play a clip of her talking to the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, very clearly she is the senior person. She is the person that is in charge. And for her to describe herself as being a nobody, I don't buy that.
And the fact that Putin was so threatened by all of this that he actually made me a star, just, I thought, spoke
she's glowing in that
massively to Russia's own, Putin and his team's own insecurity.
So it's Putin's insecurity. Now, let's imagine on January 6th, 2021 when we had the infamous Capitol riot in Washington, D.C. What if there were Russian state officials on the ground there handing out cookies or sandwiches to the protesters and to the police? Do you think that we would view that as a benign act? Something that's not a big deal? Of course not. We would have been incensed. So anytime we apply the same standard to ourselves, it really just shows how hypocritical we are. We would not want Russian personnel on the ground during our events, but we go to these countries and we do that to them. She's running around doing this little photo op because she does have power, and because we are interfering. We're not just there to observe and just be nice and just support whatever happens. That's not what we're there for. We have power. We're the United States. We were spending billions of dollars there. We were looking for a certain result, and that's why she was there. Now, here is the phone call, by the way, I wanted to play. Just as a reminder, she was, I think it was Russia released a phone call between her and the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. And she is describing who is going to be in the new government after the old government is overthrown. So she was there talking about, oh, I'm a nobody. I have no power. It's an exaggeration, my power here. How the heck did she know who was going to be in the new government? And by God, the people she talked about became the interim government. So we were pushing certain people to the top, and that's what she was doing. And her characterization of having no power, what an absolute fraud. So let me play this phone call here, just as a reminder of how much power she did have. And again, notice that she's really the one directing to the U.S. ambassador. She's telling him what's going on and running him, not the other way around.
What do you think?
I think we're in play. The Klitschko piece is obviously the complicated electron here, especially the announcement of him as deputy prime minister. And you've seen some of my notes on the troubles in the marriage right now. So we're trying to get a read really fast on where he is on this stuff. But I think your argument to him, which you'll need to make, I think that's the next phone call we want to set up, is exactly the one you made to Yats. And I'm glad you sort of put him on the spot on where he fits in this scenario.
Yatsenyuk, he would become the interim prime minister after the revolution. So he's a big player here, and they're working with him.
And I'm very glad he said what he said in response.
Good. So I don't think Klitsch should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
Why is it our business?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you think, in terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking, in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys. And, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Klitsch and Tony Book on the outside.
So she's saying Yats is the guy, and he became the guy, and Klitschko was kept out, although he did become the mayor of Kiev. So, again, we have no power. We're not involved in anything. But here she is describing who's going to be in the government, and by God, they were in the government.
Needs to be talking to them 4 times a week. I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay, good. Well, do you want us to try to set up a call with him as the next step?
My understanding from that call, but you tell me, was that the big three were going into their own meeting, and that Yats was going to offer in that context a three-way, 3+1 conversation or 3+2 with you. Is that not how you understood it?
No, I mean, that's what he proposed, but I think just knowing the dynamic that's been with them where, Klitschko has been the top dog. He's going to take a while to show up for whatever meeting they've got. He's probably talking to his guys at this point. So I think you reaching out directly to him helps with the personality management among the three, and it gives you also a chance to move fast on all this stuff and put us behind it before they all sit down and he explains why he doesn't like it.
Okay, good. I'm happy. Why don't you reach out to him and see if he wants to talk before or after?
We're not involved.
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Okay, I've now written, one more wrinkle for you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Can't remember if I told you this or if I only told Washington this, that when I talked to Jeff Feltman this morning, he had a new name for the UN guy, Robert Seri. Did I write you that this morning?
Yeah, I saw that.
He's now gotten both Seri and Ban Ki-moon to agree that Seri could come in Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, fuck the EU.
No,
That's her
exactly.
famous
And I
moment
think we
there where
gotta
she
do
said that,
something to
F
make
the
it stick
EU.
together, because you can be pretty sure that if it does start to gain altitude, the Russians will be working behind the scenes to try to torpedo it. And again, the fact that this is out there right now, I'm still trying to figure out in my mind why Yanukovych did that. But in the meantime, there's a Party of Regions faction meeting.
I'll go ahead and stop it there. But again, the point here is that she is absolutely working to determine outcomes in Ukraine, managing personalities, getting on the phone with Klitschko and with Yatsenyuk. And we clearly are not a standby actor just wanting to help whoever needs help. We are absolutely directing things. And anytime you give somebody money, you're giving yourself power over them. And if you accept other people's money, you're accepting their power. So if we give them $5 billion, that comes with a tag, that comes with a condition, and that is our control. And that's what we do across the world through the State Department, to our NGOs. We offer money to help them, but they have to do A, B, and C. And we've seen that in Africa, for example, where we've threatened to withhold aid because a certain country passed laws about LGBTQ rights that we didn't like. So we threatened to remove money. So everything, all money comes with a condition. And certainly the money we're spending in Ukraine also had conditions. So now I have two more clips. The first one is about Boris Johnson and the negotiations in 2022 that we interrupted in April 2022. The two sides, Ukraine and Russia, were sitting down in Turkey, in Istanbul, trying to negotiate an end to the conflict. And then Boris Johnson came in later and advised the Ukrainians, I'll say advised them to stop negotiating with the Russians and to keep fighting. So here's what she says about that.
And speaking about another negotiation process, Istanbul...
And notice too, when he brings up something that's very sensitive, she starts grinning and smiling. It's kind of creepy, actually, because, again, this is a situation where hundreds of thousands of people have died. And if you see how she talks and how she looks, her expressions, for her, it's nothing but a game. It's nothing but a game, and I kind of find that to be deplorable. It's really, really insensitive to what's going on there.
2022.
This is another Russian myth. Good grief.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
an urban legend. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where is the legend? What was true? Because there was a story first told by former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett that both sides were really close to the end, to the successful end of the negotiations, and then Prime Minister Boris Johnson interfered and stopped prevented Ukrainians from signing the deal. And then Ukrainian Representative Arahami kind of confirmed it, that yes, he said in an interview that there was some kind of advice from Boris Johnson to stop negotiating and to win this war militarily. Where is the myth? Where is the truth?
Well, look, I mean, only the negotiators know for sure because they were the ones in the room. Ukraine obviously had an interest if they could stop the war and get Russia out. So
I find it interesting. She said, only the people in the room know for sure. So in the beginning of the clip, she said it was Russian propaganda. Now she's saying, well, no one knows for sure.
This was something that was worked up. The Turks offered a venue. We were not in the room. We were actually not very much aware of what any kind of deal was. We just sort of said, look, we're here to support. If you want us to know more,
just here
know
to
less,
support, guys.
We're here. And we never were completely sure how empowered either negotiating team was, whether Putin really was ready to sign on to what his team had agreed to, and whether Zelensky was either. But relatively late in the game, the Ukrainians began asking for advice.
So that's what it was. The Ukrainians were asking for advice, and we just gave them advice. Again, we were, knee deep in all that, and we do that thing where we say we're giving you advice, but there's all these sticks we have with us to really threaten you in a certain direction, and basically go, if you don't make a certain decision, some bad things might happen to you. So they weren't asking for advice. They were communicating to their senior partners what they should do next, and we said, no, you keep on fighting. And now this last clip is about Trump. When Trump came into power in 2017, she left the State Department and came back in 2021 when Biden got elected. She is not a Trump fan because Trump thinks there's actually room to negotiate with Putin and to sit down with other world leaders and try to bring end to conflict, something that she does not like. She would prefer that we never have any sort of negotiations and we just try to enforce our policies and our positions. And the rest of the world can take it or leave it. So she is not a fan of Trump. Here's what she says.
You know that Putin is dreaming, and he has stated that in many speeches, that actually his real dream is New Yalta. He wants to repeat that scenario. He wants to get together with American president and Chinese chairman, and to sign the new treaty about the new world order, and to divide the world, literally, as people as leaders in 19th century did, as happened in Yalta in 1945. And he believes that if Donald Trump is elected, that would be possible. Do you think that that the next American administration, Trump administration, is hypothetically capable to have that kind of a deal with Putin?
Well, first of all, Putin needs to wake up. It's not the 18th century, it's not the 19th century, it's not even the 20th century. By all accounts, Yalta was not a good deal for us and not a deal that we should have cut, and it resulted in 70 years of Cold War. Why was that a good idea? And these men.
Let me stop there for a second. I don't think Putin wants a new Yalta. He wants the three countries in the world who are relative superpowers, U.S., China, and Russia, to sit down and actually work together, seeing as we're all armed with thousands of nuclear weapons. You can call it a new Yalta. I just call it common sense that these three leaders would sit down and talk. And maybe you toss in Modi from India, because India is has 1 billion people and they're a rising economy and country. But I wouldn't characterize it as a new Yalta. It would just be the three biggest countries who have the power to destroy the world sitting down and having a discussion on how we avoid global destruction. I have no problem with that. But the reason they don't want that is because if we do that, that's almost like treating Russia and China on equal terms. And we never want to treat those countries on equal terms. We want to dictate to them. We want them to fall in line with our thinking. So that's why someone like her does not want that sort of conversation to happen.
Massive nuclear arsenals facing each other when we had been allies in that war. It made no sense, right? It created a bad, unstable world. Any similar effort by great powers to divide the world and to tell the smaller countries what they can or can't do is going to be equally unstable, including for Russia. So
that is rich. We are not supposed to tell smaller countries what to do. That is the essence of U.S. foreign policy, telling smaller countries what to do, I think the CIA has overthrown 70 countries. We just, destroyed Libya. We've destroyed Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, just in the last 20 years. We're destroying Ukraine right now through our policy there, and we're trying to get Taiwan wrecked. All the United States does is tell little countries what to do. So to hear her say that is absolutely ridiculous. But I'll continue.
It's not going to work. But more importantly, whatever Donald Trump may or may not believe, the American people hate a bully, and they hate an aggressor, and they always have. That's what we are born of, a perception that in those days...
We're the bully, we're the aggressors.
Great Britain was trying to bully us, right? And what we have stood for all of these years is the sovereignty and self-determination of nations.
We've stood for the sovereignty and self-determination of nations. Again, it's a cosmic joke for her to say that when we have interfered in countless democracies over the last 70 years post-World War II. The hypocrisy is amazing.
And so whatever Trump may want to do, I don't think the American people will let him abandon Ukraine. I think you see that in this vote for the $60 billion that finally happened in April. Trump was against that money, and he fought against it and tried to bully Republicans in the Congress. But they were listening to the American heartland that said that we don't want to live in a world where a big guy gets to eat a little country just because he wants to.
Let me stop there again. The Republicans in Congress were not being pushed by the Republican voters. They were being pushed by the military-industrial complex. They're being pushed by the insiders. Recent polling shows that the overwhelming majority of Republicans think that we're doing too much for Ukraine. A smaller plurality think that we're doing enough, and only like 10 or 15% of Republicans actually think we should be doing more. So if Republicans were responding to the voters, Republican voters, they would be cutting Ukraine funding, not giving them more. So she's not being honest about this. And again, she wants to characterize this as this great American effort to help out a poorer country like Ukraine. No, this is a military-industrial complex, U.S. intel, U.S. foreign policy project, not a project of the American people.
Because that's going to have implications for us, and it's going to end up with us in a war of great powers that we don't want. So we'd have to stop this here and roll it back here. And that's why so many Republicans said no to Trump and voted for the money. It's the first time that Trump actually lost in the U.S. Congress. And it wasn't because Biden was president, it was because his Republicans didn't agree with him. And I think even if
the military-industrial complex, that is the number one thing that is hard to fight against. And even Trump, she's right about that, couldn't stop that. The U.S. foreign policy, the military-industrial complex, is the most powerful entity in the United States. And if you get in the way of that, they will try to bring you down. So Trump talking about stopping the war in Ukraine is actually probably the biggest reason why a sniper's bullet almost hit him in the head.
If he's elected, and I hope that the American people are smarter than that, but who knows, he will not be able to abandon Ukraine. And because the American people don't want to live in a world where bullies like Putin can do what they want. And the implications that has in Asia and with Iran and everything else are not safe for us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Misha.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So that's the last clip there of the interview with Victoria Nuland. Truly, in my opinion, a despicable person. And every time you hear someone like her talk about Ukraine, one thing you never hear them talk about is how many people have died in Ukraine. What is life in Ukraine like right now? Is Ukraine better off 2.5 years later than they were before this war started? Do you think Victoria Nuland will ever talk about, the 500,000 people that have probably been killed, Ukrainian soldiers? You go on Twitter, you go on Telegram, every day you see these military personnel grabbing men off the street, fighting them, punching them, dragging them away to vehicles to be taken to the front after being trained for a few weeks. Someone like her will never acknowledge that and never acknowledge the human cost of this war. Because, again, she is a very, in my opinion, sick person who looks at the world as a little board game. And she's playing a game, and she doesn't see the human suffering. And that's why she can talk about this conflict and be sitting there grinning and smiling and, treating it like it's just a a chessboard, and she's moving little pieces around. Oh, and so what? That piece is 500,000 men. Oh well, that's part of the game for her. So again, she's a truly terrible human being, and I'm glad she's out of government. But unfortunately, people in government still have her type of thinking, and that's why we're continuing this war in Ukraine. And the only thing that might stop it, or might bring it to a conclusion that's not going to get us all killed or end a nuclear war, is if Donald Trump is elected and he has promised to sit down with or call Zelensky and call Putin and try to bring an end. And he has talked about that. He has talked about the human cost. He has talked about the amount of death and destruction in Ukraine. He is the only one, by the way, who has done that. I haven't heard that from Nikki Haley or Harris. He was the only person running for president who's actually said, "I'm sad to see so many people just being slaughtered, and I want it to stop." And by God, I want it to stop as well, because at its current trajectory, Russia is going to get what they want, and the longer it goes on, is just more people killed. So hopefully Trump does get elected, and he can bring this conflict to an end. Well, that is it for now. If you are new to my channel, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.